really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, episode number 9. This is actually the first true episode where I'm going to be sharing with you what I'm learning in the moment, while the previous 8 episodes were recorded to provide you with a foundation of information about the 7 lessons that I'll be probably referring to a lot during this series. So I'm glad you're here with me today. I'm going to be talking about post-traumatic growth, and that's a topic I've been researching recently for a presentation I'll be doing a little later this year. So I've been doing a lot of reading about some of the research that's been done by Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun at the University of North Carolina on post-traumatic growth and how we can actually grow and transform after we've experienced trauma. So there can be positive outcomes to trauma, which is what I've always believed and I've witnessed and experienced throughout my life and career. But it's really nice when there's research that validates this theory and this principle. And so it's been something very fascinating for me to study for a long time and to go through the process of working on growing and learning and even transcending pain and suffering in my own life. So I wanted to just share with you because this felt exciting to me. One of the ways that I always seem to learn is that I come across a principle somewhere that really inspires me or grabs hold of me. And while I'm in the process over several days of learning more, reading about it, and studying about it, synchronistically, other information just seems to pop up before me. I might see something on Facebook or on Twitter that applies to the same topic I'm studying. And in this case, I received an email that gave me more information about this topic. So I'll explain that in just a moment. But one of the things that I've learned about post-traumatic growth is that it occurs because of the disruption of our accepted beliefs about life and how life works and what should happen and what we expect to happen. This is called our assumptive worldview or assumptive beliefs about the world and how it works. When those beliefs become shattered and disrupted, whether it is by some sort of trauma directly to us, getting injured or sick, or going through a horrific experience, or the death of a loved one, everything that we had thought was true or thought we could rely upon or believe in ends up being shattered, which is exactly how I have described my own response to my father's suicide death so many years ago. Everything I knew and trusted in the world was just gone in an instant with my dad's death. And that felt like, to me at the time, a tragedy that could never be repaired. I felt that I was broken in a way that could never possibly come back together again at that time. And this is exactly what Tedeschi and Calhoun talk about. It's that shattering and breaking apart that allows transformation and new growth to occur. And they've seen it over and over again in the research that they've done with people who are going through trauma or grief. So, as I said, very validating. And one thing that they point out through their research is that the deeper the disruption, the more severe the shattering, the greater the transformation that is possible. And that feels very real and validated to me in my own life experience as well. And here's something interesting that what they describe as the way that we actually end up growing because of trauma and kind of reassembling ourselves in a new way, a new and transformed way, is through what they refer to as rumination. I mean, they use that word, ruminate. When you ruminate on your circumstances, which also means to meditate on or ponder, and I would use words like reflect or contemplate on your situation, you can find deeper meaning and purpose within that situation, which allows you to put the broken pieces together, as I said, to reassemble new beliefs about the world, a new, bigger understanding of the world and how life works and what happens in the world. So once you've experienced a traumatic death like I experienced with my father's suicide, the new worldview that I came away with is that anything and everything and everyone can die at any time. Life is fleeting and fragile, and I have to take that into account all the time in my own life because I never know when my last day might be. So that realization influenced how I chose to live every single day. And part of my process of rumination, if you want to call that, or contemplation and meditation, came through my work in hospice, having time to sit at the bedside with patients, listen to their stories, be present for them, learn from them, take those stories home, and really bring them into my heart and be instructed and influenced and inspired by the stories that my patients were actually living out. So all of that work that I did allowed me to rewrite my own story in a more positive way and to find new meaning in the tragedy that had happened in my life, and then from there on, a new purpose for my own life and how I was going forward to share this information. So it's really profound when you think about this idea that's being validated through research, that literally when we're broken apart in certain ways, this tremendous opportunity unfolds for us to come back together again in a brand new way with a whole new understanding of life and the world and new motivation to live differently and to live from a higher level of consciousness. It's really profound. And so I was so excited studying and learning about the research that Tedeschi and Calhoun have done. And the very day that I was really digging into this information, I got an email from the Center for Action and Contemplation, which I've referred to in my other podcast a few times. Father Richard Rohr, a Franciscan monk or friar, founded this center in Albuquerque to study what he calls an alternative orthodoxy, to kind of transcend and go beyond the Catholic and Christian theology that he learned in seminary, and to create really a living spirituality that informs people in every day. And I've been getting emails from him on his mailing list, which are always really informative and inspiring. But the very day I was working on post-traumatic growth and putting my own talk together, an email came from him that mentioned the work of Dr. Edith Eger. And Edith, at the age of 16, was taken to Auschwitz with her family, where her parents were exterminated immediately upon arrival. And Edith and her sister survived and were later rescued from Auschwitz at the end of World War II. But she had gone through this incredible trauma and loss during her time being in the Nazi concentration camp. Eventually, she met and was mentored by Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, about his experience at a concentration camp. And so Edith has gone on to do her own writing and really to completely change her life. She became a psychologist herself, working with people who had experienced trauma. And she writes that she learned to be responsible for her own life and her own happiness. This is how she rose above the trauma that had happened to her and the post-traumatic growth that she experienced. And here's a quote from her. "I can never change the past, but there is a life I can save. It is mine. I was victimized, but I'm not a victim. I was hurt, but not broken. The soul never dies. Meaning and purpose can come from deep in the heart of what hurts us, the most. So I just loved those words that she wrote. And what stood out to me was the idea that I was victimized, but I'm not a victim. I feel like that's a message that really needs to come through right now in our society, because we are beginning to recognize more and more how many people have been victimized in the past by other people, but also by the systems that we've created, the assumptive systems that operate our world, and the institutions that exist here, that inform us and that provide structure to our world. We are learning how much those very systems themselves have traumatized and victimized people in our own country and other countries around the world, and it's happening before our eyes. People are being victimized and hurt by the systems that are here, but again, by other people as well. But I loved the message that Edith Eger had, that to have been victimized does not make you forever a victim. And I liked the empowering thought she had that each one of us can rise above victimhood by simply choosing to be responsible for our own lives and our own happiness. And for me, I try to look back, where in my life do I still cling to the idea of being a victim, of being harmed by someone else, and where do I hold on to that, and what do I need to forgive in order to rise above victimhood? So I think that part of this process of post-traumatic growth, I think it's an ongoing, lifelong process. We're constantly working on it. We've all experienced trauma in our lives, different types of trauma, and some we might judge, some people's trauma to be far worse than our own. But all of us have trauma that we're working on and trying to heal. And I think the most important factors are that we recognize that trauma has been there. We take responsibility for the idea, as Edith Eger said, I can't change what happened in the past. I can't get rid of the trauma. I can't make it not be true. But I can decide that I am still a whole person no matter what has happened to me. And therefore, I'm going to create a life of happiness and purpose and meaning out of whatever I have. I'm going to reassemble the broken parts in a positive way, and I'm going to live a life that matters and that has meaning and that offers value to other people. Not a life of anger and bitterness and resentment, but a life that brings joy and love into the world. And I can do that because that is part of a normal process, the normal process of post-traumatic growth. When we do acknowledge what's happened, acknowledge the pain and the shattering that has occurred in our lives, and then face up to it and decide, I'm going to start working on this. I'm going to start contemplating and studying and learning what I can, and I'm going to find a way to put these pieces together again that's just going to blow the world away. I'm going to make the best possible situation I can out of this life that I have. For me, that's a really empowering message. It reminded me, as I said, to go back and clean up my own history. What am I holding on to? Where do I still label myself a victim of a system or of another person? How can I heal that? And then how can I make my life be something that is a positive force in the world that brings love and joy to others, but also to me? First do I find joy and love in my own life, and then how do I share it with others? I think it's also important to realize, even as I'm saying this, I feel profoundly at times the hurt and suffering of other people. And more than anything, I want to make that better. I so wish that I could rid some of the trauma that is being done to other people by systems and by people in our society. But I recognize that I don't have very much power to change things outside of me except through the power that I have to change me and change my own life and how I live, how I show up in the world, and what I bring to the world. So what I am recognizing and starting, I think, to get right in my own life is that I have to do my own work first before I go out and want to change the world. That in fact, the more I do my work, the more post-traumatic growth I experience, the more I'm adding that growth and inspiration and love and joy to the collective, the more I'm actually helping for the good of all our collective to grow beyond trauma. So the most important thing is to not stay stuck in the trauma, to not get lost there, but to remember, if I'm willing to face it, I'm willing to go into the pain of it and look at it. That's the secret to actually being able to grow and transcend beyond it. Be willing to sit with the pain, willing to acknowledge it, and then willing to do the contemplation and the meditation and the studying and learning that it's going to take to put all the pieces back together again. And I remember seeing something in a movie that I really loved a number of years ago. The woman who was one of the main characters in the movie, as her art project, assembled broken pieces of pottery and made really beautiful images out of these all different kinds and colors and patterns of broken pottery that she reassembled into beautiful creations. Sometimes I think of that when I'm imagining this idea of post-traumatic growth. All of these shards and fragments and sharp broken pieces of our lives that kind of hover around us, those are potential building blocks of a brand new artistic creation of our lives. So I hope that these thoughts and this image is something that applies to you. For this whole podcast, I'm just operating on this hope that whatever I'm experiencing, other people might be experiencing too. And that by sharing some new insight I had or something I'm reading about or thinking about, maybe that'll be just the thing that someone else needs to hear too. So. I hope that's true for you if you're listening today. There is a link where you can share a message if you would like. You can record a voice message, and on the notes for this episode, there's a link you can click in order to record a little message, and you can send it just to me, but you can also send something that you're willing to have recorded for other people to hear, and there's a chance I will be able to play it in the future and share it with other people. So tell me your stories. Let me know your thoughts and insights. I'm really happy and excited to include those as part of this podcast. So until we're together in the next episode, I hope you will remember that we're here for love. That's honestly the very most important thing we could be working on right now. And face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and just love each moment of this precious life that you've been given. Bye-bye.